Here we go.
Okay, let's do it. I didn't think about these questions at all, so if I get a little bit lost, just if I get lost, just keep me track.
You got it.
Okay.
This is my first time as well.
Okay.
So we're both like, both of us have no idea what we're doing.
Nothing.
It's probably
no
special.
Idea.
It's special that way. All right, here we go. All right, so first and foremost, I'm here with the owner, founder, and operator of Rocket Dog Rescue.
Yeah.
And how long have you been in existence?
Since 2001, so going on 22 years. Non-stop madness.
Okay. Why don't you share a little bit about your life for rescue, and then we'll get into the rescue. You can do the whatever version that you're comfortable talking about, but just what about your life, your upbringing led you to this imminent career that you've put in front of you?
Well, I am sitting in the least likely place that you would have ever thought to find me, because I was my life started off pretty rough. My mom was a drug addict. She was she had a lot of issues. I was born awarded the court to an unfit mother. They don't even have that anymore. We lived in a bunch of different communes and homeless camps and just wherever, under people's stairs, wherever we slept that night. Or
both you and your mom?
Yeah. Okay. And then my little brother when he came, and my older sister at some point was part of it. But
is this in San Francisco?
It was wherever we were.
Okay.
Stanislaus, Bay Area. We hitchhiked to Mexico at one point and ended up in a Mexican prison with my mom because they didn't have foster homes. So
tumultuous to say.
Yeah. So my life was uncertain. I lived moment to moment like a feral animal. I had no idea what was coming next. I just knew I was raw instincts and nerves. The person that was supposed to be my main protector would disappear for weeks at a time.
Right.
Sometimes I don't ever remember being fed or dressed or having an actual bed to sleep in. So I didn't have a normal childhood, right? And I think that as I got older in life, and my mom died when I was 10, so I was on my own.
Right.
And I was in and out of a few different foster homes, but really it was just me and her and whatever chaos was on the path, and just no history and no forward plan, no idea what was going to happen the next day.
Right.
And as I was living out in these old abandoned junkyard, in the old warehouses and stuff down by the waterfront, and
What part of the Bay Area then?
Well, it's all built up now, but back then it was the old abandoned warehouses, right down by the stadium.
Were there other people there too?
Just a bunch of gypsy camps.
Okay.
So I would do a lot of I would just walk down the middle of the street, no cars, and all by myself with whatever dog I was hanging out with, right down the middle of the street, blasting Talking Heads or whatever I was listening to at the moment. I'd crawl into a building and crawl up the side and shimmy down a giant I-beam 5 stories up, and it would just be me and this, and the music. Oh, hold on a sec. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Great.
It's constantly going.
Yeah,
the calls.
I know.
So I would be in these places, just literally living like a feral child. I would be sitting on an I-beam at 5 in the morning when the sun would start to come up, and the sun would be shining through the broken cracks in the building, and the birds would start to glide through, and this was my only feeling.
How old were you when you were doing
13, 14, wow. 15. I lived out there until, I think about 30 something, 35,
right.
When I finally made some big changes. And part of that was, I would find, all of the people around me were you lived in these camps with these people, you were kind of all together, but some of these people were wanted by the FBI, some of them were legitimate killers.
Trying not to be found people.
Right, and it's these were my family, right? at the time because I just didn't have anybody out there.
What time was this? Was this in the
I was born in 62.
62, so this is like the 70s, the 80s.
I was early punk rock days. I was out there early punk rock days. I was one of the only like punk rock like girls in the Bay Area at the time, and so that was like an incredible life. That actually felt really like just I had so much hope and energy, and you know, that because of the way I was raised, I had no idea what it looked like to be successful in this world, and all I emulated was like drug addicts and criminals and just this outlaw life, and I was, you know, going to be really good at it. I was just going to emulate that because I didn't have any other influence, you know. And you know, I would find these little weird pockets of peace, and like when I'd find an injured pigeon on the ground, and I'd pick them up and I'd give them water and I'd take care of them and feed them until they could fly away, you know. Like I'd take care of them for weeks. I'd find little kittens that were like infected eyes, and I'd nurse them back to health. And what in those moments, it felt like the clatter and the clang and the loudness of the world would just kind of fall away, and I would be very, very much in this moment of nurturing with this animal. And it was the only time I had ever felt anything like that, you know. And I kept being drawn to these situations where I was like, you know, like everybody else would be out like doing some crazy thing over here, and I'd like climb the fence to the junkyard where the junkyard dogs were down there, and I'd go and sit in an old abandoned car with all of them like sleeping all around me, you know. So you know, what I ended up going to the SPCA, which at that time was you know, the city shelter, the kill shelter, and I used to go there for that very reason, just to feel the connection, especially when I was having a really, really like intense time and I needed a break from the world, because there's no protection out there. You're just constantly bombarded with whatever's happening, you know. There's no place to go to feel safe or to feel, you know. So I went to the SPCA and was walking through and saying hi to all the dogs, right? And there's this one dog, and he was this like he was a big black and tan hound, and he was like banging at me really like right in my face, right? And so very, very bossy like, right? And I'm like, I kept trying to walk away from him, and I kept like walking back, and the shelter was closing, but he was like looking right into my eyes and like yelling to me, and I, you know, through the glass, and I was like, I went up to the desk to ask about him, and they said that he was out of time. And I knew that I didn't have any ability. I couldn't have an animal in my life. I couldn't even take care of myself, you know, like I couldn't, and I wouldn't, I just didn't want to do that, but I did. I ended up getting him out of that shelter, and from that point forward, something shifted inside of me, and then I just was trying to keep him safe. And I didn't even know what that looked like, because I didn't really know where the dangers were, you know.
You're responsible for something now.
Right. So, you know, I'd see like whoever I was hanging out with, they'd talk to me in a certain tone of voice, and he would start to shake, and I'd be able to look at him and be like, oh, he's afraid because this person is abusive. And I realized, like, I never really realized that I was afraid, because I was like, I could handle anything, right? I had to. Right? And it was
sense of self-preservation.
Right? But I'd see it reflected in this dog, and I just started like finding myself just like moving farther and farther away from that like land of chaos, and you know, with all of the people, you know, and it was just me and Leadbelly. That was my dog's name, Leadbelly. It was just me and Leadbelly. At one point we were living in the back of a Morris Minor truck, which is literally a 4x4 foot little trailer that I could pick up and remove with my hands, and it was just big enough for me to lay kitty corner and for him right next to me. And I lived out there with him like that for a while, just trying to keep him safe and trying to not go to jail and trying to not get hurt so I could take care of him, and trying to stay away from people that caused, you know, oh my gosh, like the police, you know, like just staying away from people that could be a danger, right? And I ended up going to jail for petty theft, for shoplifting like food or something from Safeway, because that's what you go to jail for once you're out there long enough, you know, right? So I went to jail, and they were like really threatening me. It was down in San Mateo. They were like threatening that they were going to keep me in jail for so long, and I thought that my dog was going to go to the shelter and be killed.
Right.
And the ladies at Martin Newport's soup kitchen actually took care of him for me, and they wrote all these letters to the courts and stuff, and they ended up releasing me, but it was unexpected. Just like one night they're like, okay, like, you know, you're ready to go, and I'm like, what? So I was like shocked, but also like I realized that, okay, this was I didn't actually think I was gonna get out.
Right.
And I walked barefoot because I didn't have any shoes to like a Greyhound bus, right? Well, I was just like walking down the street and the Greyhound bus was there, so I stood in front of it with my hands up, and the guy opened the door and he's like, what's going on? I'm like, I need to get to San Francisco. And he's like, well, you can't without a ticket. I'm like on this Greyhound bus, the door's open, it's pouring rain, I got no shoes on, and a bunch of sailors like in uniform were like, we'll buy you a ticket. And they bought me a ticket to San Francisco. They paid for it. I got off the bus and I didn't know where to go, but I knew I couldn't go back out there. I knew I needed to get my dog, and I just needed to be someplace to keep him safe.
Priority, yeah.
Yeah, and I walked barefoot in the rain to like the Salvation Army I just didn't know where to go, right? And the guy's like, I'm standing in the door, like soaking wet, no shoes on, and I told him, look, I need a place. I didn't know what I needed. I had never, been to this.
First time that you're like,
yeah.
what?
The first time, like, I ever thought about, like, oh, maybe
you should make a change.
Maybe I should make a change, right?
For the dog.
Right, for the dog, lead belly, for my dog. Had to keep him safe. So anyway, I'm standing in the doorway, the guy's like, yeah, no, we don't have any space, you're gonna have to apply, you're gonna have to do all these things. I guess I just like stood there looking so like lost that he's just like, okay, and he just told me to go sit in a chair for like 12 hours. He's like, it's gonna be 12 hours, just sit there. So I did, and then like the next day he came in and drew like a pair of pajamas and said, put these on, you're in the program. And that was, I literally didn't know what was going on. I just did it, didn't ask any questions, ended up getting into a program right away, and stayed in the program. I didn't have any idea what I was going to be doing. I didn't have any idea what my life outside of that looked like, but I just knew I couldn't do it anymore. Right. My soul was devastated.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it anymore. The animals that I would see that were hurt out there, it just killed me.
So rock bottom for you is the idea of like affecting your animal. Like,
well,
like
I mean,
the idea of altering Lead Belly's future.
I mean, I lived fast and furious. Like, I didn't care if I died. I literally just didn't know if I was going to dissolve one day or fly off the face of the earth. It's like, I didn't have any concept of like what a future, I didn't have any fear of not fulfilling my future. I had no idea what that even looked like. Yeah. So for me, it was just like, okay, I'm just going to roll with whatever happens today. But for my animal, I was so tuned into like every, like you'd start to shake or you'd like get startled, and I'm like, all your maternal instinct. It really just riveted me like on the inside. I was like, okay, I couldn't let him be like that. Anyway.
So you felt things through your animal.
Yeah.
Like when your animal was scared, your animal was hungry, when things were uncertain when it came to your dog is when you decided to.
I could see it clear as day when it was him, and I was like, I am not going to tolerate that.
Right.
But I would never be able to do that for myself.
Right.
And that's just, that was the beginning. I mean, that was my story of how that decision was made.
Right.
And then it was, just showing up and being in these programs. And fast forward, I, of course, got my dog back, Lead Belly. Yeah. And was living in an apartment. Oh, my God. Can I tell you the story?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So about 500 years ago or whenever, when I was out on the street, I used to do these like studies, and they give you like $50 or $20 to answer a bunch of questions. Yeah. And on one of them, it was like, do you want to apply for this like housing list? And I'm like, I don't really care. What do you mean? What is it? And she's like, well, we'll give you $25 and you just put your name on this list. And I'm like, okay. And I didn't even think twice about it. Well, I go into this program, go into a secondary program. 2 weeks before I'm supposed to graduate from that program, I get a call from a social worker at the program saying that my housing number had come up. And I'm like, and this is 7 years later. Right. I got the goosebumps just now. 7 years later. Yeah. And we didn't have cell phones, so nobody would have known how to reach me. Right. But they somehow tracked me down. And some list that I was put on 7 years ago, my number came up right then.
And they were able to find you and get a hold of you.
Yeah. Jeez. And I got an apartment. And crazy, right? So
what did that feel like? Did you feel like there was just some sort of like destiny? Like you put all this work into like changing things.
I mean, you can tell I was raised by hippies because I'm like the universe was looking out for me. Okay.
I mean, there's some timing there that's undeniable, right?
It's insane, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, it was crazy, and I ended up meeting a woman. I just was doing a lot of art classes and I did a lot of documentary photography. I just poured myself into stuff. I didn't know what to do with my life or with myself, right? So I was out at City College doing these crazy documentaries. I would go out to all the homeless camps where I used to live and take photos of people like cooking breakfast in their little, huts and stuff, right? And anyway, I did this massive art show at one of the galleries up there, and the only people who showed up were the homeless people and the police who used to arrest me. And it was amazing, okay? It was very good. Anyway,
do you still have that stuff right
Yeah, it was called Angels, Outlaws, and Outcasts, and it was just stories about being out there,
Really?
Yeah.
Do you still have this stuff around, like documented, like you have pictures and all that?
Yeah. I don't know what to do with them, yeah.
You should send them to me so I can put them as part
of
as you're talking about this, I'm going to put them up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I have a picture of me in lead belly with a black eye.
Oh yeah, I need all of it. Yeah.
So anyway, I ended up at this little art show. The little thing I was doing some like arts and crafts thing, and a woman walked up. Her name is Helen Hill. She was the founder of Hopalong Animal Rescue, and she said, she bought some little piece of art, and I was like, I love dogs, and she goes, I rescue dogs. I rescue hound dogs. I'm like, what? I was like, screw, I'll like skid to a halt. I'm like, what are you talking about? I want to do that. And literally 4 days later, I had like 6 big crazy dogs in my house. Like they didn't give me the little old ones. They gave me all of these crazy dogs. One of them ate the wall out of my house, man. But like, and I called them up, and I was all like, I hope you guys let me foster again, but I have to tell you that this dog ate the wall out of my house. And you can hear a pin drop. I'm like, I hope that you still let me foster. And they're like, started laughing, and they're like, okay. So I learned all these, So I'm like taking care of all these dogs, working side by side with another rescuer, Lori. She's been doing rescue for 20 years at that point, right? So I just went everywhere with her. We drove to LA to bring old dogs, hound dogs down to the rescue.
How old were you when you were doing this?
Like 35.
35. Okay.
Something like that. 40. Okay. I have no concept of time or space. I'm not that kind of being.
Are they still around? Hopalong?
They are, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they are, but Lori, who I was talking about, actually started a different rescue, a hound rescue.
Oh, okay.
Here in Oakland. She's amazing. But anyway, I sat side by side with this woman, and we just rescued animals, and she would talk nonstop about how she's going to write the bios and why you use these words but not those words, how you do this, how you do that assessment, what you're actually looking at, and I absorbed it like a sponge. And so there was a bit of a break point at the time. Everybody comes into rescue questioning everything about the rescue or whatever. Like, why are they doing it this way? Like, why don't they do it that way? Why don't, everybody has all these ideas. They might not know how the whole rescue runs.
Right.
At the time, I was all like suspicious, and I was like, I don't know. I mean, the reality is that I just didn't agree with some of the decisions that they made to to euthanize animals.
Right.
And I got to the point to euthanize an animal that wasn't getting adopted, and I was like, I would never ever euthanize an animal. And one of the people that was around me said, well, why don't you just start your own? And I'm like, okay. And I literally just did. I started Rocket Dog Rescue because I couldn't I'm going to tell you something. So I used to go into the shelters and pull dogs under the name of the other rescue, and with their permission. Okay. And there was this 14-year-old hound dog named Hank the Cross-Eyed Hound. He was like old, and I really wanted to save him, and they said no, and because he was old and probably not placeable. And I walked up to the front counter, and I was like, they said yes, and I'm taking him, and I realized as I was walking down the street with this old dog that could barely even walk, I'm like, if I have to lie to save an animal's life, I'm not in the right place. Right. And also that, it's just not right. It's just, so that's really what spurred it on, is Hank the Cross-Eyed Hound, and, so I had already learned so much, like from hanging out every day with this other rescuer, right, that I had a great advantage. And also they gave me all the crazy dogs.
Right.
They would have holiday parties and people would show up with their cute little 4-pound Shih Tzus that were perfect with little ponytails.
Yeah.
They're foster dogs, and then I couldn't bring mine. That wouldn't go over well, right? And I'm like, oh, I all of a sudden realized, like, oh, everybody doesn't foster these big crazy dogs like I do. And it was interesting because it sure taught me a lot about animals. And it taught me a lot about dog training, because the trainers that I had to work with back then were military style dog trainers, and they were rough, man. They would make people cry, they would scream in your face, they would scream at the dogs, and so I would have to learn, well, a couple of things. I mean, I would have to learn how much of that I actually should listen to,
right,
and how much of it I should measure out with my own life experience.
Because you've lived with crazy dogs, and there is a difference, right?
There is a difference.
There are dog trainers out there that actively work aggression and reactivity.
Yeah, and
I've never truly even lived with one.
I've lived with them all.
You know what I mean? So
I lived with them all.
Like knowing how to live, knowing how to operate, knowing how to communicate with these animals.
Yeah.
And live with them is entirely different than coming in and going, "This is what you should do. Okay, bye."
Right. So I managed all these animals that nobody else could manage, and I got them homes.
Right.
Yeah. I got them to a place they would stay with me for a long time. But those are the early days, and I would take the dogs that nobody else would take.
And this was under the name Rocket Dog when you finally, how did you come up with that?
Yeah. Oh, that's not an exciting story. I want it to be a more exciting story. I was trying to find something that flowed with Lead Belly, but it just sounded like we saved old blues musician. So I was like, I don't know. I was like, Rocket, like we're going places. It felt retro, but also like we're really getting stuff done. Like we're getting it, we're going.
Yeah.
So that's where it came from.
That's
it's
awesome.
not, yeah.
That's awesome.
Sorry. So yeah, that's how I got started. I mean, that's the whole story
What would you say as you started the rescue? Like, obviously you're experienced at that point, you're in a groove, you're the right-hand person when it comes to the crazier dogs, so you're already dealing with some of the more difficult aspects of rescue, but having your own rescue, what would you say was some of the more difficult things early on when you started it?
The most difficult things earlier on was for me to learn how to interact with other humans. Because I used to carry a hatchet everywhere. Like,
I believe it.
People were afraid of me because I had to be. I had to be protective of myself, and I was 5'3" and I weighed 90 pounds that night, and people, I just had to put that protective layer. So I was like, I will smash your windshield out if you even look at me wrong, right? So I had to learn how not to use those skills and how to use I had to learn how to talk to people and have conflict resolution because you're going to be talking about hard stuff when you're doing animal rescue. Yeah. And the other thing though is that as I was focused on the animal, and being honest about their stuff and trying to explain it to these people in such a way that I could say, like, this is where this dog's danger points are, and this is how I've managed it, and this is, I'd be explaining all this to them, but what was really happening is that I was building a confidence that I wasn't aware of. I was not focused on myself, I was focused on the animals, and then trying to learn how to talk to people, and I was learning these skills. They was just happening.
Yeah.
I mean,
different types of people, I'd imagine too, because you would find
different kind of people, but I would be sitting, I live in a funky old weird place. It's, but it has a giant yard. It's really good for what I do, right? It's good for the rescue. All my neighbors have adopted dogs for me, right? So my place is really good for that, but it's also really run down and not in the best neighborhood and stuff. And I have people come over and sit on my stairs with me, talking to me about a dog, and I'd send them home with the dog, and I go by later to drop off some stuff, and I'm like, oh, they live in a mansion. But it's like, I might have been intimidated, if I wasn't just so focused on the animals, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
I've had that experience.
You know what I'm saying,
when I traveled into the city to work, I would be working aggressive dogs, and I would be in a $4 million mansion, and there's antique Porsches in the garage, and it's like, this is not my world.
Well, it's weird because it doesn't change they have more value, or it doesn't change anything. It's just weird to me because I'm like, oh, we were just sitting on my weird old steps, talking about a one-eyed dachshund that needed a home, right? Yeah. And your world is so different from my world, and it really did strip away a lot of that I don't know, like I guess I didn't ever have a sense of classism or even racism or anything from growing up the way I did. It was just like me trying to like not die every day, okay? Or not go to jail, right? And it was interesting that people could sit and talk to me and take value with what I was saying when they had a totally different world than me and probably went to college or at least had a nurturing family experience probably. I don't know. But so that was that was the biggest part of animal rescue for me is just trying to not be crazy because that was my old school fallback, right? And just not have any reaction to stuff because it's a highly emotionally charged dog rescue is you're just constantly under fire, under stress, right? So not letting that build up, not letting myself get overwhelmed, finding ways to talk where it takes the charge out of it, and those are the things that I had to learn. The dog stuff was actually pretty easy because living in a house with 10 dogs felt like normal for me. It felt like this I can handle.
Does it still feel normal to you? Like if you have like if you're home now, how many dogs do you have?
I have 6 dogs.
6 dogs.
But I mean, I've been doing rescue for 20 some odd years. I think that's pretty sane,
Have you gone down and did it feel awkward? If you ever been in a moment where you only had a couple dogs in the house and it just didn't feel right? Would you say that's like
that's right. Yes. But I mean, I wish that I don't know. I have 6 dogs, but 3 of them are 14. I mean, this is one of my babies, right? So it's like, I don't know, I'm trying to not sound like a crazy person with 6 dogs right now, but it's like, it does feel, when the numbers get much lower, it feels kind of like, wow, it's so quiet in here, it's so weird. But I grew up in a place where, I think there's just something a little different about the way I'm wired too. Actually, now that you're saying that, because we go into big hoarding cases, we'll evacuate animals from emergency like fire zones. We have to go in when these animals are in high stress. Like going into a hoarding case where there's like hundreds of animals and there's like dead animals and you don't know what you're walking into.
You showed me the video. I remember you showing me the video, and I remember distinctly you with a flashlight and a camera. But then the people that you brought in to be with you were like way back there, like what? And you were just where the dogs, like just flying through it like it was normal.
Like it was normal. That's where my brain gets quiet. I mean, the rest of the time my brain is like all kinds of crazy things are happening in my brain. But when I'm faced with that kind of chaos, I get calm, I get quiet, I get hyper focused, and I'm able to like figure out what needs to happen and in what order it needs to happen, and that's a huge gift. I think it's probably also ADHD. It's a symptom of that, but it works for me. You know what I mean? And I recognize that. I mean,
it's funny, like neurodivergent, like it's also the reason that I deal in behavior. Like if I have a day and it's just obedience, I lose my mind. Like, I need a dog out of control. I need something to pay attention to ground myself in what's going on so I can think about what's happening. But if nothing's going on, I'm just like, okay, I'm not gonna teach stuff to sit. I can't do it. So no, I totally get that, like the hyper focus aspect of it. And also like the tumultuous childhood aspect too. Like
my gosh.
That plays a big role, I think, in what what our comfort levels are and what our trajectory is as well. So when did Rocket Dog start to become like something? When did you, like when people started to recognize Rocket Dog and fosters and volunteers started to flock to you, and when did things change?
Well, I gotta be okay, first of all, I want to touch on something you just said about the childhood. I got to tell you, it really impacts the way I think about the work that I do. It also really impacts the way I interact with the dogs when they're at their most fearful. A lot of times I'll be called out to take a dog off the side of a highway that might have been hit by a car, and he's like freaking out and nobody can get near him, and I'll zoom out there because we have a 24-hour helpline, so I get these calls, and I'm like scooting closer and closer to this injured dog that's out of their mind with fear, and I like at some point I'm able to reach out and just like give them a treat and then run my finger just right under their chin just to check in with them a little bit. And it's that moment of understanding what they're going through, understanding that fucking fear, you know what I mean, and that uncertainty and not knowing what's next, and really just like that freaky like how do I get out of here feeling, I feel it.
Yeah.
Like right away.
Yeah.
I go into these like the hoarding cases, and I am able to like just get myself super grounded in that moment because I know that feeling.
Yeah.
And it makes it harder when you lose an animal. Like when an animal is killed at a shelter that you were trying to save, it makes it harder to have let them down. It feels more personal to me.
Yeah, no,
You know?
I totally get it. You're not out on a limb in this perspective.
Yeah.
You're talking to a person who was pulled from a home from drugs and abuse, and my first connection in that like world was dogs. Like I would leave the home, roam the hillsides of Tennessee to get away from all the abuse, and it was the dogs that like kept me warm in the winter, like would lay on top of me to keep me warm, and it changed something in me. It changed the moment that I have with them when I look at them, like the feelings that I feel. And in that time, it was probably the only time I felt things is when I was interacting with a dog, because the rest of the time you're kind of just numb. You know, you're in a survival scenario, and you can't really tune into that, you know, emotionally. It would destroy you. So
Well, the people who make it out of that kind of stuff alive are the people that are able to shut down.
Yeah.
That's, you know, you just, it will shake you apart.
Yeah.
Okay, so you asked me an actual question.
Yeah.
What was that?
So when you branched off,
So
you've jumped out on a limb, you're starting your own rescue, you're in a groove, you're learning to talk to people.
Right.
When did you realize, oh shit, something's happening here?
Okay, well I have to tell you this. First of all, two things. I used to not know how to drive because I didn't think it was a good idea for me to drive while I was out there. I was like really high, right? So I didn't ever drive, right? So anyway, newly sober, I'm like, I don't know how to drive, but I've got all these dogs, I need to go. So I would call a cab, and I would bring 6 dogs in the cab, and I would go down to the corner of 18th and Castro, and I'd go down to the corner of 18th and Castro and look around and find a milk crate and sit down and just hold all these dogs, and people would come up and talk to me. Okay, I'm going to tell you 2 things about this that is really amazing. So people would come up and talk, they'd be petting the dogs, and I'd be like, hey, can you hold the dogs while I run and get a chai or use the restroom? And I'd come back and they'd have a couple of their friends, like the guys that lived out there, right? And they'd be holding the dogs, and that's literally how I got people to volunteer for me, right? And so we'd all be just sitting out there, and if I had to raise money for an animal, that like a surgery, I would bring other people's kids and dress them up in tutus and boas and hold a bucket out there and raise the money for the surgery, like just right there, just doing it like that. And we would have the best time, and we would raise the money, and people would come by and drop 50s and 20s all day to help us, right?
God.
And then
And
a friend of mine.
would you show up at the veterinarian clinic with this like ball, like
I did that before, yes.
Cash?
Yeah, I would.
I'd
be like, okay.
The cash is king.
I have to believe that they loved us.
Did they? And they gave you like, oh my god, that's hilarious.
Right. So, after a while, I actually got like a checkbook.
Yeah.
And an actual. I mean, I had a bank account, but sometimes I would show up with a bucket of money. And.
What year is this? We gotta follow.
Well, let's hear it. It was 2001. It was when we were founded, so it was right about then because we were like just rolling,
Yeah.
And so it was very down homey.
Right.
I gotta tell you, one time we did a hoarding case.
Yeah.
You're gonna think I'm crazy, but this was before social media.
Yeah. Okay,
we had Yahoo groups.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember that. They were awful. It was like next door on steroids. Anyway, so we had this hoarding case, and we had over 50, 60 animals, and just in terrible conditions, right? So I forget how we got the word out, but we just told everybody we were going to be at the corner of 18th and Castro, okay? And we were going to just bring all these animals. So we showed up with all of our vans and puppy pens and literally unloaded 50 animals, and we're tagging them, putting collars on them, tagging them, doing our paperwork right there. The Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence showed up. They're holding the dogs. They're streaming tears and mascara and glitter. And
who is that?
The Sisters? Oh my gosh.
Indulgence?
Yes, you need to Google. They're amazing. They're nuns that do amazing. They're nuns, not real nuns. I'll show you. I'll show you. So the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence would show up. They would just hold our dogs, beg people for money, like totally strong arm them to donate. People from the neighborhood that have heard about it or might have seen us out there before would come over and just like help us. And it was like a total mass unit on the corner of 18th and Castro, right?
Yeah.
But it seems crazy, but That's what it was.
So you would adopt them out right there. You pull them from the hoarding case.
Yeah.
And
I have no place for these dogs to go.
The adoption
we didn't have a
where
sanctuary.
they got out of the cars.
Right. It was insane. Ticks all over, like just infected eyes, like whatever, a mess.
And the cops never, like, it was...
No, the cops loved us, okay?
Oh, wow.
They would tell other people, they would like guard us sometimes. And
that's amazing.
yeah, they used to call me all the time though when they had people late at night that they were having some kind of like a break, emotional break, and needed us to come sit and talk to them, because they knew what my history was and they knew that I would be and I'd show up, right? Yeah. So we were, and the neighborhood association, the business association, we were always allowed out there.
Wow.
It's just crazy, like even though it was like nobody had ever seen anything like that before, and it probably was like legitimately crazy.
Yeah.
But people were into it. They understood the legitimacy of it. They understood the dedication and the heart of it, and they wanted to be a part of it, and they wanted to protect it. And that's really what I felt.
Do you feel like that everyone coming together for the same cause when they see these situations, they see these dogs that need help, these dogs are put through the ringer? Do you feel like that it's like that nowadays? Do you think you could repeat that if you tried?
No.
Yeah. What's different?
Well, the whole world is different.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, after this pandemic, we're all feeling universally frayed around the edges and uncertain, and there's a lot of...
Do you think that the Bay Area culture had a lot to do with it back then?
Yeah.
Do you think it was a Bay Area thing?
Bay Area was all about, like, nobody raised an eyebrow. Like, just let me get in there, let me help, let me do this thing. And, we didn't have dogs running away, we didn't have dogs biting people were being aware, they were being conscious. Nothing... People would fill out their paperwork and they'd be like, let's just give it a try, and they work through things with the animal. It was a world that was more really accepting of these animals in the moment where they were, what they needed in that moment, animals and people apparently. And I don't see it that way anymore. Like right now there's a bit of a vibe about kind of like somebody just pushed a button on Amazon and ordered exactly what they wanted, and if it didn't seem exactly right, they'd be returning it the next day. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory way. I'm saying the world is different. A lot of people moved in a mass exodus out of the Bay Area, and the people that moved in aren't connected to this community. They're from like Boston or Wisconsin, wherever they're from, and they're connected to their community there, and they're only here for however long, and so there's not a lot of connection to me.
No connection and high expectation of the animals.
Right, and maybe unrealistic expectation, but it's like this whole like I equate it to like hitting a button to order on Amazon, because you know exactly what you want to get, you can just send it right back if it's not right, and that's what it feels like more to me.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think I see that on the training side. You would think that the Bay Area would be home of a more humane and gentler side of training, more mindful of the animal, but with the tech industry and people wanting their dog fixed on a stopwatch, it's created trainers that will fix the dog on a stopwatch. It's, with a lot of inhumane tech. But you're right, it's I want it now. Right. How do you think that, how has that impacted, like the returns?
It's really, I mean, we can work with somebody for weeks and they'll return a dog within 24 hours. It's weird. It's a very weird time, and it's not just our organization. And I had to really check in about that. I reached out to everybody, Angela from Family Dog, I reached out to Lynn from Milo, I reached out to all of the Sherry from Wonder Dog. I'm from Muttville, and actually I reached out to Wonder Dog too, but I was like, look, what are you guys going through? What is this? Because I wanted to make sure I wasn't somehow failing.
Just for perspective, those are the biggest and most long-term rescues in the Bay Area that you just named.
Right, but
so we were talking in a combination of a century's worth of experience.
Right. So I mean, the reality is, and that we were here before them, I'm just saying. Not like I'm bragging, but I find it there was nobody. I had nothing to model this after. And when other rescues would start to come up, I'd be like, yes, join us at our adoption event. You could pull the dogs under our 501c3 until yours is here. You know, and
it's not enough. Like, no matter how big your infrastructure is, it's never enough. Like, it's, you know, it's not, you just feel like you're, you know, catching rain in a pail when it comes to like the animal welfare.
Now it does. Yeah. For a little while I felt really good about it, but I got to be honest with you, and I don't mean to be like a total downer here, but like if I were to walk out the door right now and get killed by a bus, my life would have never made it. There's no difference. I have never made a difference. I mean, okay, this guy is here, that guy is here. People's lives have been changed for the better, but the way the animals are brought into shelters and they live and die in those shelters without ever being seen or known or you know what I mean, right?
I do, and I don't. I think that the currency that you deal in, families that have gotten a new family member through Rocket Dog, the rescues, both junior and peer rescues. I think that it probably doesn't feel much like a community because, to your point, at this day and age, everybody's running around like a chicken with their head cut off, as my granny used to say. And so it's hard to stop and realize like all the good when you're just constantly putting out fires over and over and over again,
It just feels like, okay, maybe I'm just feeling really down right now because I gotta tell you, the way the world is in the past 9 months in the rescue world, it's ramped up to an insane level. Like, it was like this 20 years ago when animals had 85% euthanasia rates or more at shelters. They're back up at that level right now.
Yeah.
We just took 25 animals a week from Fresno shelter or this shelter or that shelter. The next day the euthanasia list is just as high.
Yeah.
That's, I think, where I'm maybe feeling that.
I get that.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask though, what do you think what lit the fuse on that? I know that we talked about the pandemic and we talked about everybody wanting a dog and we talked about people returning to work and potentially returning the dog, or we talk about the backyard breeding industry.
I gotta be honest with you. I'm seeing this, and maybe it is, of course, backyard breeders, because when everybody was laid off of work, they had no way to make money, and maybe selling a litter of puppies did get them through. But more than that, during the pandemic, the shelters were closed down. The rescues were being bombarded with over 500 emails a day from people that wanted dogs or wanted to volunteer or wanted something, right? And we couldn't get back because all of our volunteers were on lockdown. We couldn't get back to people in time. We were getting dogs from shelters, but really sporadically, because they were just shutting their doors, so they had to find different ways to reach out to us, right? I feel that breeders from either Mexico or Texas or wherever it is, and maybe even locally, started really seeing that and being like, people want dogs, and so they started bumping up and selling dogs, because before the pandemic, nobody would ever talk about a breeder dog. It was very rare. People
in the Bay Area.
In the Bay Area, it was very rare. Not like it's a judgy thing, one way or the other. I don't. As long as you're a good person, I don't really care where you got your dog. Just be a good person, right? But it's like, I noticed about midway through the pandemic, people were like, "Oh yeah, I got my dog from this breeder or that breeder," and that became the everyday conversation. What that told me, something really weird was happening, and I do believe that it was people that realized that there was money to be made, and they started mass producing large. There was puppies to be sold, and they were selling them like crazy. And I think that because we are saturated with animals now, and I think that they're still out there breeding those animals, thinking that there's a market, and there really isn't. And maybe some of the dogs that were sold are now out there having puppies. I don't really know this dynamic, but something's weird about that.
I think you see it. I can confirm it because I work with a lot of niche rescues, a lot of breed-specific rescues. And so they were pretty much the sounding board for breeders coming out of woodwork. These dogs are poorly bred, and a lot of the rescues, NorCal Golden Retriever Rescue, were getting inundated with golden retrievers that were atypically reactive, aggressive, biting kids, resource guard. They'd never seen the behavior that had happened. And when you chase down where these dogs came from, a lot of them were purchased on Craigslist and purchased, and so you're right, backyard breeders or amateur breeders, startup breeders, came out of the woodwork. Or puppy mill that produced quite a lot, actually. If you look, it's not the classic way that it used to be, where it's like these gigantic puppy mills when all you have to do is sell your dogs on Craigslist.
Right.
Like you in a second. Internet has provided a connectivity that you can go out and you can purchase a dog right now for $300 on Craigslist.
Right.
And you can see that if you go on like Craigslist right now, it's just hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds, of huskies.
Right. Well, that's the other thing. It's like, I would never have a pure breed anything in my rescue. Man, we were like the king of Muttville. Man, we had like all the mutts, like, weird mix-ups and stuff. If we had like a poodle, it was because it was like 19 years old and only had one eye.
Right.
If we had we get a lot of the pitties, the pitty type breeds and stuff, and that was always like, we never turned our away from them,
Right.
Even when it was fashionable to
Right.
not stand behind them. But,
Right.
all of a sudden we have purebred Great Pyrenees and we're getting so many doodles. We've got 5 doodles in our rescue right now, whatever the doodle mix-up is.
Yeah.
We've got a million different like cattle dogs and Aussies and all these like purebred dogs. There's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Like, why are they pouring into the shelter?
Yeah.
And these purebred rescues, the Golden Retriever rescue, they didn't used to have dogs like that.
Right.
They have like 1 or 2, 3 or 4 dogs.
Doodles.
Yeah.
They're taking doodles because they're trying to save as many as they can. But you're right, like they're everybody's bending. Everybody's trying to bend
Right.
in the interest of trying to save animals.
Right. But why is this suddenly like, why are we all, it's a struggle. It's a struggle because we got to do the work every single day and we can't look at the big picture because we're too busy doing the work, trying to save their lives.
Yeah. I identify with that 100%, especially with like social media and the people that want to pull you. Like right now, there are, more people arguing about breeding, ethical breeding, rescue, training than participating. Like that's just, it's become topical. It's become a means of like fighting over, but not a lot of people are fighting for the dog comparatively to like fighting over the subject matter, and if you did fight for the dog, like you probably wouldn't be talking much on the internet because you're busy. Once you open up that door, you're busy, So let me ask you this.
Okay, so wait, back to your actual question.
What was my actual question?
So when did I know that we had stumbled onto something when we were...
Yeah, when did things just take off and you didn't know, you were hanging
I'll tell you right now.
Okay.
About 2 years into being a nonprofit, my friend calls me up and he's like, I was just at the Folsom Street Fair and this man was wearing your t-shirt. You've totally made it. And I'm like, oh, you're right. Because people really think about what they're going to wear to the Folsom Street Fair. That's a big deal. So I was like, wow, that's interesting. Then, what was it, like 6 months later, I got a call from Animal Planet and they wanted to film us. They did this, it was an hour-long special called Rocket Dogs. It's very funny and amazing. You should watch it. So they showed it for 1 season here, but I think that they thought that I was a little too rough. And maybe had too many tattoos because that was before, pit bulls and parolees, right? And so they didn't keep it as a series, right? But it's showing everywhere else still. Right. It's showing in the Philippines. It's showing in Puerto Rico. Right. I went to do a spay-neuter clinic in Puerto Rico, this big spay-neuter thing, and people were taking their pictures with me, and I'm like, I think they think I'm the pit bull lady, right? I think they think I'm Tia, right? And they're like, no! And they're like, Rocket Dogs! I'm like, okay! Yeah. So it's showing in like Japan and like all these places. I get the weirdest emails sometimes, like asking for advice.
What year did it run?
Well, let's see.
For National Syndicate, what year did it?
If I was founded in 2001, it was like the third year into 2000.
And so did that expose you to something completely different? More or less how did that change your business, right, wrong, or indifferent when you started to get that kind of notoriety?
I think it brought us more legitimacy, which was in turn really it really gave me inner strength a little bit differently. Because it's one thing to be kind of just going along doing your thing, and another thing for people to say like, and I cannot handle praise. Okay, I'll post all these stories on Facebook, but it's not about, and people are like, you're an angel, but it's not about praise. It's like, I just want to tell you about this moment I had in this situation and how it felt. But I don't do well with praise. I get really like nervous. So so it wasn't necessarily that we got praise from people, but that people started to looking at us differently, like, you're actually here doing this work that nobody else will do. Like that everybody wishes that they could do, but they can't because they just can't.
So the only change really is that people got an insight to what it's truly like.
Yeah.
That's the real change.
Yeah, it was really, yeah.
Yeah.
And then again, I gotta be, so at the beginning of the pandemic, we were left in a trust. And thank goodness, because I don't think we would be here if we didn't have that. So we were left in a trust, and that was somebody who had met me when I was sitting on a milk crate at 18th and Castro with 6 dogs. So, I mean, we're sitting in a building in Oakland that I bought.
Yeah. And
we made it through a pandemic.
Right.
I mean, we don't have hardly any of it left because we had to survive the pandemic, but the fact that trust was there for us, and it was somebody that saw us when we were so young and just starting out, but understood the heart and the energy behind it, and believed in it.
Do you feel it was similar to the housing scenario where
I do.
They came in right
where the universe looked out for me?
Yeah.
I mean yes, and also maybe that there's a honesty to the there's, I don't know, maybe people connected with that, with how I felt. Like it was this bright light, and I'm not trying to sound like,
I know what you're saying.
but it's it was so glowing from me, and it still is.
Yeah.
I still feel it, right?
Yeah.
I'm just tired all the time now. But it's I think that people have that in them too, for different things in different ways. And I think that people connected to it and felt it. Whether or not they could be a part of it, they at least respected that I was out there, and the volunteers were out there doing the work. And I really, that changed me a lot. It changed my life. It wasn't just I'm doing this because I need to take this one dog and take care of it. It's I think that really changed the way I looked at it.
Right.
Yeah. We're here for a different reason.
Right.
And then so many messages from families saying that adopting this animal saved my child's life. They were suicidal. They were dealing with mental, clinical depression, they were dealing with other things, and it's this animal legitimately saved their life. Right. Or that their parent were dying in hospice, and that this animal just held them all safe all the way through. And just hearing those stories, and it changes everything for you.
Right.
You're still focused on this guy and this guy and saving him, doing the work, and making sure you're accountable and doing all the work you have to keep things rolling and be a stand-up organization. But then the way it impacts other people,
Right. It's the only moment to kind of take a step back and see everything for what it is, as opposed to being in a cog in the machine all the time. And,
right. And it definitely changed me, and I think that that's where I realized that something very special was happening.
Right.
Yeah. And then
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let me ask. So, in terms of aspiring dog owners at this day and age, what would be your message to anyone that was considering rescuing a dog right now at this day and age? If you could say one thing to them, or the thing that you tried to tell them.
I gotta tell you, and this is what I tell most people.
Yeah.
It's going to be awful at first. You're going to be literally saying, what was I thinking? Why would I do this? Because you're going from having a nice, peaceful house where things are running really just the way you want them to inviting some crazy, insane animal into your house, and it's going to be awful. They're going to poop on your floor even if they're housebroken. It's going to be really bad, right? And then it's going to get better. And then all of a sudden one day you're going to be like, oh my God, this is my soulmate.
So, and that would be contrary to what a lot of the stigma that people hear with rescue nowadays. It's they're trying to, just everything's gonna be fine, and trying to convince you to take the dog.
You're
out, listen,
man. It's gonna be bad, but that's not.
Suck.
And I tell them, it's that's not gonna be your forever. It's gonna be really weird. They're gonna chew stuff and do weird stuff. If you really care about your rug or that guitar, pick it up, roll it away, don't put it away. Don't even think that you're gonna try and see if they're housebroken, right? Yeah. I'm just really honest about that. But it gets, Well, once you get into a groove and routine is king, and all of that stuff, that's really my deal. Routine is king.
Okay. So that's your message to the owners.
I mean, it doesn't sound very.
No,
but you know what?
Believe me, it is exactly what they need to hear.
Yeah.
Because you don't want them dreaming up these ideas on their own that things are terrible. Well, you want them knowing that it was on the billboard.
Right. But also, it's when the really weird, awful, weirdo thing happens when they came in and the dog chewed up their leather couch. It's of course he chewed up your leather couch. It's a big giant rawhide. But also, why would you have a leather couch with a dog? But whatever. And then, but you know, when that happens, they'll remember what I said, and they'll be like, ugh. And then they'll be like, I have to go buy a new couch. I'm like, I wouldn't. I would just wait a little while. So, you know, I would just wait.
So, do you think there's any out in terms of the shelter crisis right now? Do you just think we're treading water?
I got to tell you right now, we're saving, 26 animals a week. Yeah. We can't get them fixed. They're out there for months at a time. We used to fix every animal. Vets are backed up, man.
Crisis,
and then, So right now, today actually, we packed up a van with like 40 animals and drove down to Tringdale to get them all fixed at the SNP van. Thank goodness for the SNP van, man, they're amazing. But that's where we're getting our animals fixed, and we'll do that a couple of times a month to stay on top of it. But not being able to afford the veterinary care, not being able to get the veterinary appointments, and then having the vets also backed up because everybody's got a doodle that needs to go to the vet for a toenail got ripped off or something. We can't even get into an emergency vet sometimes.
So what do these vets say to you? The people that you have a relationship with, a working relationship, that have been there before and after, like what are they saying specifically is going on their side of the industry?
They're just overwhelmed. They just don't have appointments. Our vet will always make appointments for us, but it's got to be at 7 a.m. before all the other clients get there. So they're really trying to be...
And are they raising prices as well? And what does that conversation look like?
I can tell you that right before the pandemic, it would cost, if a puppy broke with parvovirus, it would cost about $300 to $500 to treat them. And then if the whole litter broke with parvovirus, it would probably cost a couple $1,000, right? And it was like a lot. And we would have to like fundraise like crazy. Midway through the pandemic, we had a couple of parvo cases, and they ended up being like $3,000 to treat one puppy. And I was like, whoa. And it was really hard because we're not gonna decide to euthanize a dog just because we can't afford it. We'll just have to pay it off over time and just, So now, the last time we had a parvo puppy, which was like, 6 months ago. Yeah. It was $13,000.
What are they saying? Like, are these obviously?
That was at Sage.
More of the corporate side.
And then we went to another vet, and it was like $8,000 to treat one puppy. So if you have a litter that breaks with parvo, you're just like done.
Yeah.
And I'm using that as an example because it's very short amount of time.
So why would they raise their prices in this? Like, I know they have a staffing crisis. I know that much. But what about...
I don't think people are getting paid more. I don't think rents are any higher.
Yeah.
I think most people own their buildings, so I don't know.
And you haven't heard... they don't tell you directly, hey, this is why there's a price difference. There's no there's no conversation around that.
They just say that they have to... Yeah, it is different. The vets that have worked with us over the years will give us fair pricing and do the best they can, but we still had to pay a $50,000 vet bill for over a few months. Yeah. Because of all the weird emergencies that come to our door every day. Yeah. So they still work with us and give us the best pricing they can, but chances are we're going to have to go to emergency vet late at night with these dogs that are brought to us run over by cars and stuff. We can't not take them. Right.
Well, what do you say to the rescues that are struggling, that don't have the experience, that don't have the stability that you've been able to obtain, like the people the rescues that are thinking about closing, like what would you say to them? Like the struggling aspect of the rescue industry right now, right? There's either rescues have closed or they're on thin ice and they're trying not to close as best they can.
I don't know. I got to be really honest with you. Trying to raise money off of social media is like really diminished. We would be able to do a $20,000 fundraiser in the past if we had an emergency come up, and we'll maybe at the most now make $1,000 that I'm so incredibly grateful for. Right. But it's changed dramatically, and I think that as rescues, if you are struggling, it might be the right time to look at the other rescues around you and think about merging. And just merging your resources, merging your volunteers. Are you really strong in the foster aspect, but this other rescue over here is a really good fundraiser but might not have that infrastructure? I think that would be the way to stay safe and to stay as a working rescue. Yeah. But it's really hard. Yeah. I mean, we're all going after the same grants. We're all applying for the same grants. Right. The other thing I can say though is that I I'm trying to, there's a couple of things. If you were applying for a grant for an animal, your chances of getting it, you're competing against everybody, right?
Yeah.
But if you're actually going to help humans in some way, like that, we're starting to rethink the way we're applying for grants.
Right.
Like, because you can apply for different grants that way.
Right.
So we're actually hiring a grant writer, and I hate to say it, but it's like our good old days of being able to just write a grant and whip it off ourselves and stuff. It's like, yeah, that's okay, but it's a competitive world out there, and it would be worthy to spend the money.
So are you saying you're looking to get into the more humanitarian side to bring?
Yeah, we changed our 501c3 nonprofit. Yeah. Our what is it called? We changed our bylaws.
Okay.
We changed our bylaws because we are helping people.
Right.
We step in emergency cases.
Yeah.
We rescue animals, but we have a component to what we do here that we're trying to like build a program around, and that's that we have an apartment on site here. It's a private apartment, brand new stove, private, like brand new everything, bathroom, nice bed. It's a studio apartment, but we're giving that to somebody coming out of a program for a year at a time, and they would be the caretaker on site for us.
Okay.
We're also looking into, because this building is zoned as a hospital and zoned for live-in and zoned for kennels, which is crazy in a neighborhood, right? We're looking to turn half of the space back into a hospital so that we could actually provide some care. We have started doing community outreach clinics where we're doing, you and I had talked about doing some training with some of the youth in this area, but your world is so busy right now. But we're giving free vaccines. We're having a vet volunteer with us for those days to give rabies vaccines. We're doing microchipping, deworming, everything that we can do to help people because they can't get an appointment. So we're kind of shifting up what we're doing. We've always done these things, but we're trying to actually build programs around them so we can apply for it.
Because you have the space. This is a former vet clinic in the zone, so you could host, that's amazing.
So just trying to work those details out. I really had to like shift gears because our old way of fundraising, which was just to ask people when we had an emergency, we don't ask for money all the time. But when we do need it, we ask and we usually get it because we don't ask all the time. But it's just hard. Everybody's uncertain. Everybody in this world right now feels uncertain, I think. Everybody's not quite sure where we are, where we're going to be, And I think that the days of just being able to give money and give resources are, like if I need to collect clothes for an emergency, people will show up here with a huge mountain of really nice stuff for us, right? Very specific things that will go directly to help another person. People will give it to you. But I think just giving money is hard for people right now,
Yeah, I can see that, and it also, it has to do also like what are your largest? You're big on. You have a large following on Facebook, and Instagram, but like social media is diversified, and it's not, when you think about like from my world, when you think about TikTok, it's not regional.
Right.
It's like people are all over the map on TikTok. So like fundraising or rehoming dogs, it's like a gamble versus like Facebook. It's more regional. Like people from the Bay Area, people seeing what's going on in their backyard, people seeing terrible things that are occurring with, their neighbors or their patrons. And so you lose a little bit of that humanity when no one's really on that social media to the extent that they were before.
Well, I think everybody is on social media, but I don't see half the stuff. I follow so many amazing people. I never ever see anything from them. The algorithms have it set up where I see the same few random people that I don't really even know. And I see your posts, but other than that, I see like just random posts all the time, and I think the algorithms have really screwed with our ability to reach people consistently.
You're absolutely correct. The fact that a feed is being presented and it's being driven by AI, and it's here's this is new. Look at this, and no one's even like following the follower, like the people that they're following anymore.
I can't find any of my people. I have to search for them. I'm like, well, I haven't heard from them in a while. Are they not posting? And then I see
from the fire hose.
Exactly. And it's like, it's a weird new world, and we have to really think about it. Like, I worry, like, did we get all the way to this place where we bought this building in the middle of a pandemic with no money coming in? We had to. We had 3 days to decide. Because, like, this building has been hit by cars like 6 times. And the landlord, okay, I found this place on Craigslist, okay? I only looked on Craigslist one time, and it was like the 3rd post down. I'm like, oh, a vet's office in Oakland? I'll take it, right? So I met the guy, and we're walking through this old boarded up weird place, and I was telling him my vision. We're gonna have the neighborhood kids, we're gonna have these community, clinics, we're gonna have the church, like, next door in the Zen Center, like, everybody's gonna, it's gonna be such an amazing thing. And the realtor, like, loved it, right? So he went to the person who owned the building, and they said, no, I don't want to rent it. I just want to sell it. And he's like, came back to me, and he's like, look, if I buy this building, will you rent it? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, how much do you want to pay? So we got to set our rent, and we rented this place for many, many, many years. Before, again, it's on this corner, and it's got run into by cars like 6 times, right? And then the last time, some big box truck took the electricity off. It was just driving down the street, and the electrical wires got caught, and it ripped the electricity out of the building. And we're sitting here for like 15 days with no like electricity. And he comes over, and he's like, I bought this building with my heart, but it's not making sense on paper anymore. And I'm like, I get it, man. And it's like, I had to make a decision right then. I was like, okay, so that's, luckily we did have a little bit of cushion at that time with that trust, and we just said, okay, we're going to take this leap of faith.
He's fed up with it by that point.
He's a great, great human, man. I am I'm so blessed.
6 vehicles going into the side of the building is not cheap.
Right, and it's like weird, like random things. It's like this weird corner where like random stuff happens.
I lived in Oakland for long enough to know that people are flying by at 90 miles an hour all the time.
And it's just this weird corner that they kind of lose control. And that door wasn't a door before, it was a solid wall. A stolen van with a bunch of kids in it careened through the fence and made this giant hole right there. And my landlord came right over to fix it. I'm like, hold on a minute, let me just build a door.
So when it comes to the insane, the bizarre, the oh my god, I can't believe this happened, you probably continue to thrive in those.
Oh yeah.
You're like,
But then I'm at this place where I'm like, okay, now we have a different kind of responsibility here. I had to take care of this building. I have to have all the insurance, which is insane. It's all other rescues are probably struggling getting insurance. It's our insurance company has been with us for a long time, and he has told me it's going to be like this for another 5 years, and then it'll shift up and we'll all be able to get good insurance again. But right now we have we pay top dollar for crap insurance, and it's scary, especially in a litigious world. But luckily,
I saw a lot of rescues tap out of bite dogs and behavior dogs because of the change in insurance. Literally 2 years ago.
That's when it happened, and I had to go to my insurance guy, and I'm like, hey, did we do something wrong? Because the only bite we have on our record was a 9-pound like Yorkie. Named Smokey Joe, who's a badass, but still, and it wasn't even a bad bite, but and they're like, no, it's just the way it is right now,
Oh my god. All right, well, so last and final question. I know it's hard to look to the future, like when you're treading water, and obviously like there's financial pressure. You're doing a lot of things on the building and looking to more dive into the humanitarian side. Like, where do you see your future? Up high in the sky. If you land everything you want to land, what does that look like?
Well, I'm gonna be honest. So again, the feeling of like, now I have this responsibility to this building, right, and to this space, right, but being raised by hippies, I'm all like, it'll be fine. it'll come to us. Right?
I don't think that's raised by hippies. I think that's growing up in chaos. It's cyclone. No matter how you
it's like, I just have to have faith that all the things that I'm questioning right now, how are we going to shift gears? How are we going to pay for medical? How are we going to do this? All of those are healthy things to be processing to get us to the next step, because I'm really, really focused. I'm not saying that I'm like really good at this, because I'm not. But you live in these places of like momentary stressors, or like long-term stressors even, but you're processing what needs to happen next for you, right? So we're hiring a grant writer. We're doing things that we probably wouldn't have done before, because it just seemed like, well, we're doing fine. We don't need that, but we do now. And I realize that we all work way too hard to be struggling, to pay our vet bills, right?
So I think what you're saying is like you're behind the sky survival at this point. Like there's no looking beyond. Well, because you still have a lot of things going for you that no other rescue has going, like the work parties that come in here, Salesforce, like Drew Barrymore's.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, where do you, like, let's just forget about, like, the stuff that's at your feet right now that you have to get over. Where do you want to take this?
Okay. I'm glad that you said that, because I know that I'm sitting here, like, crying like poor on some levels.
Sweet.
But it's just, I'm just trying to let people know that I'm like, it doesn't matter what size you are, struggle is struggle.
Right.
And if we're standing in a building in Oakland where other rescues are just trying to take care of all the animals in their house, okay? I've been there, know what it's like, I know what it feels like, and it is like, it's just really, really rough. And I'm not saying like, oh, like poor me or anything. Like, I understand where we've gotten, that we've got these beautiful, like this organization that's strong. I've worked, and the other volunteers have worked so hard every single day to make this organization stand as strong as it is.
Right.
Everybody, if I were to leave, if anybody were to leave, it wouldn't fall apart.
Right.
And there's we put the work into it for that, know, and the everyday accountability, facing adversity and just showing up and handling it, even though it's hard, all of that stuff pays off.
Yeah.
It really pays off. And here, and sometimes just good old, like hippie, the universe looking out for us kind of stuff. People recognize what you're doing.
Right.
And things will come to you.
Right.
I could be, it's not like I'm like such an amazing, likable person that everybody just wants to give us money or give us stuff. I'm like just a person trying to do my work, probably stressed out all the time, right? But it's like people see you doing the work,
right,
and they believe in it, and that will come back to support you.
Right.
For me, what I feel like I want for this organization, which is something I've wanted since the beginning, is to be able to help people,
right,
and to maybe do some more work internationally, because we do work now, like we buy all the vaccines for World Rabies Day for a donkey rescue in Tanzania that does a rabies clinic,
right,
and I do that by doing a series of garage sales to raise the money, and I wire it to them, and they buy all the vaccines, and our logo is up out in the field, and it's kind of crazy, but awesome. And we do we're doing a lot of work with a rescue in the Philippines. I meet these rescuers at international animal rescue conferences, right?
Yeah.
And I'll be sitting in a room full of people talking about what struggles are all around the world, and I'm like, oh, like the donkey rescue, it's like, oh, I can do that part, and it's like, oh, I can do that part, like they're have kids that are getting rabies,
right,
so then people are aggressive with the animals because they're afraid for their kids.
Yeah.
Like, I can fund the rabies vaccines,
right,
that's a couple $1,000s. I could raise that money, right? And even though I'm like not a big organization, I don't have a ton of money, like just being willing and able to show up for that kind of stuff, and I still have that energy. Like, I like to be able to, like, being in the Bay Area and doing the work that we do, everybody loves, like, oh, you save puppies, you're amazing, and that is amazing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's much dirtier than all of that. It's much harder work and stuff, but like the struggles that are happening globally, like with people and animals, just somehow tying that together, just opening the doors, talking about it. So I am working on a sister nonprofit to address those kind of things. That,
awesome.
So that's what I've been kind of working on, and also maybe being able to like do more work with people coming out of programs, women and children's centers, stuff like that. And we are looking for a property within about an hour of the Bay Area, somewhere, Petaluma. So if anybody has property out there.
So you want to help more people, find solutions for more problems outside of even the animal welfare, the regional aspects of the Bay Area.
I just don't know how to stop what's happening in the Bay Area. And I mean, if I was more inclined to do the legal side of it, I would like try to tear down the shelter system the way it's set up, and just, not that the shelters are at fault. It would be a huge mistake for anybody to blame a shelter for euthanasia.
Do you think you're searching for your wins elsewhere to keep the wind in your sails with this?
Yeah, probably. I just, I mean,
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Well, I mean, that just kind of tells you the state of the crisis here.
Right, but I mean, I could get grants every month and still be struggling to pay these bills the way it is. And like, how do we, like, if I could, my main first goal is to find a way to provide some sort of medical on site.
Right.
Veterinary on site, and I'm looking for somebody to help me head that project up, actually. And I want to write some proposals. I have a few organizations in mind that I think that they would support it.
You're zoned. You have
Yeah.
the infrastructure for it. Like it's
Yeah.
you know.
I just need to hire somebody to head it from top to bottom, and I have the resources. I know who to ask.
Yeah.
And then we just have to talk to some veterinarians, which I think we've started also, you know, kind of working in that area, because it's really hard to get veterinarians.
Yeah, they're a lot mobile now too. I've
Yeah.
noticed that it's like they don't want to be,
Right.
you know, they want to be free birds now. They want to be in that, you know, scenario, that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's.
But I mean, because that would alleviate a lot of the money that we're pouring out
Sure.
to these vets. That I don't see that the cost of treating a parvo puppy has changed that dramatically in 3
Right.
years.
Right.
Okay, but we can't. It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And it's not just if it's the normal person could not do this, because at least we have it is a huge blessing for rescues that have a relationship with their veterinarian where they can pay their bill off over time.
Right.
Always cherish that if you
Right.
have it, because
Right.
that's, you know, trying to come up with that kind of money overnight just to get your animal treated is real hard,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. That's interesting, you know, because a lot of people don't have that. That's why they're raising money or they can't do it, you know.
Right.
So there you're writing.
Well,
you
yeah.
can write the check for based on the you know, rapport and the relationship.
Yeah, you just, you know, cultivate that kind of relationship.
Yeah.
You know,
okay.
and it's out there.
Yeah. Well, this was awesome.
Thank you.
I'm serious. It
Sorry.
was very inspiring. It was. You're very real, you know, like, because you're talking about your life, you're talking about your life's work, you know, and you're talking about problems that you've been, you know, tethered to for a very long time. Like, it's the same problem, but it's changing,
Right.
you know. So, but I don't know. I'm pretty excited about what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm excited about what you're doing. Super brilliant.
Yeah.
Like everything that you're doing to like move and pivot in the world of training
Yeah.
is spot on. It's exactly what needs to happen right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Based on the problem, right?
Based on
you
the problem.
and I think alike, you know.